Afternoon, everybody. My name's Maire, Kerrin. I'm one of the directors at the Work Psychology Group, but I'm also a visiting lecturer here at City, and I'm the module leader for one of the modules on the McNeill course, the Masters in Innovation, Creativity and Leadership, and I teach on the psychology of creativity and innovation. So I'm putting it out there, I'm a psychologist by training, so not many people talk to me at parties often, so but really I suppose what we're interested in, the research that we've done in the area of resilience, is around personal resilience. And what does the research tell us about personal resilience? What is it? Can we develop it? What does it mean within different sectors? So we work across many different sectors, for example, healthcare with the medics, teaching, and we're really interested in the work that you're doing here in the arts in terms of what does personal resilience mean within your context and your setting. So, a very common term, and it's quite interesting when you look at the history of the research around resilience, that we could go back quite a long way in terms of where some of that history comes from, whether it's around stress and well-being and so onwards. But the term resilience has got more of I suppose, more media sort of noise at the moment. But in sort of principle, it's broadly about, the idea that some people seem to readily bounce back from adverse experiences. So from a psychologist's perspective or an individual difference perspective, what we're really interested in is, well, why is that? Why do some people bounce back and seem to carry on and tilt forward, and others really struggle to sort of bounce back from adversity or setbacks? And for all of us in the different settings in the arts or healthcare and elsewhere, setbacks are part and parcel of the work that we do. So being able to build that personal resilience is really enormously important in terms of your ability to perform well in the work that you're doing. So we're interested in some of those, what we know from the research evidence around why people can bounce back from experiences. Secondly, and in relation to the work that we do here at City and the Centre for Creativity and Professional Practice, there is growing evidence about the relationship between resilience or your ability to bounce back and innovation and creative outputs. And if you dig into some of that literature and the evidence base, it's broadly related to aspects to do with being able to bounce back and go again, but also about motivation and your motivation to keep going even in adverse sort of difficult times and challenging situations. So, I think this was mentioned earlier on actually about some of the real issues that are out there in terms of what personal resilience means. And I've got a much more information around some of these fallacies and facts in terms of what resilience actually is. And if you look on the left-hand side in terms of some of the fallacies around it, it's often about being able to handle things on my own, being able to do it all by myself. Secondly, it's often seen as sort of accomplishing these sort of superhuman feats. So being able to be sort of Superman or Superwoman and being able to do it on your own. And that's often a very common perception in some of the professions that we work with in terms of being able to push through and not ask for help. And I think thirdly, some of the fallacies around you've either got resilience or you don't. So you're born with it. This notion of nature and nurture is really often put out there as some of these fallacies. If you actually look at the evidence base, and I won't go into some of the detail about that, it's much different in practice. It's about being able to seek support at the appropriate time. It's actually about being able to bounce back rather than having superhuman feats. And for me, and why I think this is so important for the work that we're doing here in the programme, it's actually that everybody can develop it, but it may look different for different people in this room. Just a little bit about what do we mean by personal resilience and what the literature and evidence tells us about it. There's three core aspects of it. In order to be resilient, there has to be some level of adversity, so there's some challenge that you're tasked with that's a setback to it. The piece that we really mention and talk a lot about in the work that we do in interventions is around these protective factors. So what are the resources that you draw upon to help you bounce back in those situations? And normally what we do through some of the workshops is explore some of those resources that you will commonly be drawing upon but may not be aware of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of those resources in a minute, but what's interesting about those resources is what works for you in your early career in terms of those resources that you draw upon to help you may not be there in your mid to senior career, or your spouse or your partner or your friends that you used to go on about to get that social support have got bored or sick and tired of you talking about it. So it does change, and I think it's important about being aware for what those resources are. And then finally, the third aspect is about that bouncing back, being able to adapt and change and move on from that challenging situation. So my last, I suppose, slide is just teasing out some of those aspects of it. When we look at the resilience resources that are around, or that the literature draw upon, and behind this slide is a whole set of evidence base that looks at some of these resources. There's many of them that are out there that I think you'll be very familiar with. So if you start from the top in terms of resilient resources up here, we have a lot of research around what are the sort of personality traits or dispositions that might be able to allow us to bounce back more readily. So there's a lot of literature around looking at if I'm a more optimistic type of person, am I more likely to bounce back more easily or more quickly? If I'm more goal-orientated, does that help me sort of motivate myself to keep going? And then finally, some of the other areas of resources, which might also include things like cultural beliefs and so onwards, that there's growing evidence or evidenced in terms of how that supports individual resilience. So that's a flavour, I hope, in a snapshot of some of the resources that the evidence suggests are important to individuals in building individual resilient resources. So I think that's my final slide, which I think I've got about 30 seconds. That's my last of it. So there you go.
Sue, can I introduce now Sue Baines from Manchester Metropolitan University? Okay.
I'm from Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm here with two colleagues. There are other colleagues who are also going to be part of the programme. Our main role is evaluation and learning, and my colleague Tamara McNeill is going to talk about that in more detail in a few minutes. What I'd like to do first is just give a bit of a flavour, really, of some of the research and practice, and those are very closely interrelated, work that we do at Manchester Metropolitan. We're part of a small team within the business school. We call ourselves the Centre for Enterprise, and most of our work is with businesses, mainly small and sometimes very micro businesses in the northwest of England, supporting them with growth and innovation. And the concept of resilience is clearly very relevant to that. We've heard about resilience in terms of individual people. It's also relevant and used in the context of places, communities and organisations. And organisations, of course, are made up of people. So our experience is about helping to meet business needs, working with business leaders to support them in various ways. And an important principle of that is starting from strengths, not from weaknesses and needs. And we've heard quite a lot already today about assets, and that's a very clearly important idea. And enabling leaders to reflect, review, revise, and learn. And we do that kind of work often with small businesses that are essentially commercial profit-making, profit-oriented, but not all. Some are value-based businesses. Some are in the arts. It's not our specialism, but we do work with arts organisations. We work with many social enterprises with a social agenda, but also the need to generate income in order to be resilient in a complex world. I don't want to go into a huge lot of detail about this, but the idea of innovation appears to be very important for resilience. We're working with partners across Europe on innovation competences, with 5 university partners and 8 company partners, creating toolkits and resources. That picture there shows a workshop some of our partners in the Netherlands ran very successfully to bring out innovation skills, needs and development opportunities in a particular company, and that's been repeated with large companies, and we've done similar things in Manchester, mainly with groups of leaders of very small companies. And just a final thing I'd quite like to flag up, because I'm quite proud of it. It was work done by one of my PhD students, working with very small volunteering community organisations in the Manchester area, struggling with austere times, with losses of various kinds of funding mechanisms and needs to diversify and so on. And what she did was adapt an approach known as sustainable livelihoods, which comes from the world of poverty reduction and international development, and it's mainly focused on poor households. But what she did was take and adapt this for use by small community-based organisations, co-producing the resources with them. Again, very much on the principle of starting for strengths, understanding assets, which could be human, social, financial, physical, or kind of public connectedness and so on. So that's... yeah, just a very, very quick flavour of some of the kind of work and some of the things we hope to bring to this programme. But our main role is evaluation and learning. So I can hand over to my colleague now, Dr. Tamara McNeill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. So yeah, I'm Tamara McNeill. But as evaluators, we very much of the view that programmes like Life are quite messy. And rather than viewing that as a methodological challenge and a bit of a nuisance, we embrace it really and try and invest our efforts in understanding that mess and making sense of it and using those findings to sort of constructively feed back and, get better results really. And that's going to be our overarching approach here. So this evaluation will be a learning tool for the programme and help to shape the activity that the rest of the team deliver. And that's really the most important thing to say to you today, is that your participation in the evaluation is going to result in a better programme. So the more that you engage with it and the more you put into working with us, hopefully, the more responsive the programme will be to your needs. To make it work, to deliver the kind of evaluation that's going to be useful, we'd really love it if you'd sort of get involved and work with us. You need to be engaged, really, to make that work. Be thoughtful about your experiences. So we've talked a lot about action learning and peer learning. Reflection's a really key part of that. So hopefully the reflection that you take part in through the evaluation will also be part of your learning experience as well. And we need you to be honest. We're all very polite, aren't we? And when we get evaluation forms, especially if it's for something that's free, we think we need to, say it was really great and say nice things, but it's not that helpful. And that's really all I've got to say. Thank you for listening. I hope it's the kind of thing that you can feel a bit enthusiastic about rather than just, it's the evaluation.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.